you're looking at the biggest narco trafficker in the world.
If you didn't do what he asked you to do, he killed you.
Pablo's plan was to weaken Colombia.
Did you want him alive or you wanted him dead?
I wanted him dead.
Yeah, me too, anyway. Was it revenge? Of course it was.
For millions of you who have watched Narcos, I'm talking the story of a criminal, the most powerful criminal of all time, the biggest drug dealer, if you want to call, of all time, Pablo Escobar. And this series became a phenomenon because of these two gentlemen here sitting next to me that we're going to get into here in a minute, Steve Murphy and Javier Pena. I want to give you some stats if you do not know who Pablo Escobar was and what he did. Here's some stats. This is in the 80s and the 90s. In the 80s and the 90s, Pablo Escobar was responsible for 80% of the cocaine traffic worldwide. According to Forbes magazine that they came out in the early 90s, they said his net worth was somewhere around $30 billion. Well, when they announced his net worth was $30 billion, his son contacted Forbes and laughed and said, "You're out of your mind." It was much more than that. At that time, he was the seventh richest man in the world. The man sold so much cocaine and had so much cash that he spent $2,500 a month buying rubber bands just to hold up the cash. There's still billions of dollars of cash till today stashed all over Colombia. Rats ate $500 million of his fortune every year. He once burned $2 million to keep his daughter warm. He once offered to pay off the national debt of Colombia of $10 billion. Again, I, Pablo Escobar, am offering the government to pay off your national debt of $10 billion, and they obviously declined. When Pablo dated his wife, he was 24 years old first time, and his wife was 13 years old. In total, he owned roughly 800 homes and villas. 15 tons of cocaine was sold a day. That's 30,000 pounds per day. In his house, he built 20 lakes. According to 60 Minutes, he was making $420 million a week, and there was eventually a $10 million hit on Pablo Escobar. And having said that, this character we just talked about, Pablo Escobar, these gentlemen were responsible for leading the DA team to finally taking down Pablo Escobar on December 2nd, 1993. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Appreciate being here.
So when they told you guys this is your project, you're going to be going, your responsibility is to go catch this crazy guy here and you got to take him down. What was your initial reaction when you were told Pablo was your project?
Well, my initial reaction was, how do we attack this? How do we go after him? I mean, you're looking at the biggest narco trafficker in the world. And you know what? We told people, we never realized, we knew he was a drug trafficker, but we never realized that violence that he had behind him, which made it very difficult. The sicarios, the assassins. You know, I had never even heard of what a sicario was, and then all of a sudden, here's Pablo Escobar, who has hundreds. We calculate 500-600 sicarios working for him. In the violence, he did not care. His message was, kill anybody who gets in my way. And if they don't comply with me, like I said, you know, wipe them out.
Was he really that brutal?
The brutality, the barbaric side of him is something that I will never understand. My main question is, why innocent people? Why kill all these innocent people? If you look at the Avianca commercial airline, it was all innocent people on that plane. If you look at the famous DOS building, which was like the local FBI office in Bogota, you know, a lot of innocent people, and he was just trying to kill one person. The bounties on police officers. So it's something that I could never comprehend. And then the famous car bombs, you know, and that's why we call Pablo Escobar the inventor of narco-terrorism.
He's the inventor of narco-terrorism.
We say the inventor, he's the one who created that concept, and we had never seen. We had seen, all right, turf wars, you know, hey, go kill these people. But, you know, like you said, it was just why all the innocent people that he went after, and just people that were at the wrong place at the wrong time that he was killing.
So let me ask you, when you took the job, when you said, okay, are you directed to take it with no options, or do you have a choice to say yay or nay when you're taking this response? Because as somebody in the military, they tell you what to do. You have to take the orders. You can't really Do you have a choice to say no to it, or?
It was a challenge for us. Of course, we're not going to say no. I never realized the magnitude of the empire that Pablo Escobar controlled.
I don't think either one of us know a DEA agent that would have ever said no to a challenge like that.
And I read about you saying that. I read about you saying the fact that the level of commitment that DEA agents have to each other, and how it went from where it was at that time, and today the number is 90 offices in 71 different countries, DEA, which is much bigger than FBI. So it just kind of shows the level of development that the developing the leaders within the departments. Go back to, when did Pablo become Pablo? I mean, you have to study this character. So Pablo was Pablo way before we found out about Pablo, because apparently he became a millionaire at 23 years old or some number like that. So as you're doing your investigation into this guy, what are some things you're finding out about this guy that's making you want to take him down?
And I got there in 1988. To me, it was the drug distribution network that he had. All of a sudden, we're seeing, I remember people telling us there'd be about 5, 6 airplanes on a clandestine runway in the jungles. You know, 5 to 6 airplanes on a daily basis. They would say about 500 kilos of cocaine. And you would have airplanes going into Mexico, Central America, then the Caribbean islands. You know, their goal was to try to get it into the South Florida area. So the level of distribution, the people working for him, the guys who owned the planes, one of the main I always remember is they loved airplanes. They wanted to buy as many airplanes as possible. So you had black market dealers in the Florida area buying airplanes to send back. That was a hot commodity. But then also your cocaine labs, 10 to 15 in the jungles. And these labs are making 1,000 kilos of cocaine on a daily basis. So it was the labs working. They'd press the kilos, I remember, in steel boxes. The laboratories were just enormous. You know, about 100 people used to work for them.
Per laboratory?
Per laboratory. They had rules. And one thing I always tell people, I'll never forget, he had signs in his laboratory that said, if we catch you using the product, we will kill you. So he didn't want his workers to use the product. Right. But then it was, like I said, the coordinates. It would send coordinates to Mexico, the famous General Noriega in Panama, the Caribbean islands. It was just something, how do you get that organized? And we always say Pablo was the CEO. He was not the one working the distribution. It was his first cousin, Gustavo Gaviria Rivero. And they grew up together. They grew up poor, but they were like brothers. They loved each other. But Gustavo developed that knack for the distribution network, sending it all over the world.
So who was the businessman? Was it Gustavo or was it Pablo?
Gustavo was the businessman. Pablo was the CEO. Gustavo was the hands-on director.
Chief Operating Officer, in essence.
You know what? That's a great term.
Operations. So he ran operations.
Yeah, he ran the operations because we used to intercept the phone calls.
Got it.
And he would do the directions. He was the guy who was getting his hands dirty. Pablo was not. Pablo wasn't top. Pablo was the one who was giving orders.
What made people want to follow Pablo? Because when you study this Pablo character, I mean, people who tell not the way it was in Narcos, you will see that they say Pablo wasn't the best speaker. He wanted to be a speaker like some of these other politicians, but he wasn't. So what made Pablo such a great persuader where other people wanted to follow this guy and take orders from him?
Well, there's a couple things, and honestly, we hesitate to give him credit for anything, but he did have somewhat of a charismatic personality. You know, he was able to persuade people. But now you look at his business model, and this is the other thing, if you didn't do what he asked you to do, he killed you. So you know that reputation gets out there. And so if he comes to you face to face and asks you to do something, chances are you're probably going to do it because you fear for your life, right? You know, we were talking a little bit earlier, just even in the insurance business, how much quicker could you have risen to the top if you had killed your competitors? And I know we're saying that tongue in cheek. It's ridiculous to say something like that, but that was his business model. He introduced a level of drug trafficking to the United States and eventually to the entire world that we had never seen before. And it was, you know, if you watch the show Narcos, at the end of that first trailer of season 1, Boyd Holbrook, who plays me in the show, makes a statement, we didn't know what we were in for. That's absolutely true. The United States was not prepared for what Pablo introduced into this country.
Seriously, you had no idea what you were going up against. At one point did you realize this guy's going to go across the line no matter what it is? Like, if we think about going here, he's going to go here. So if you're going to match this guy, you kind of got to go here to face him. At what point did you realize how powerful this guy is?
Well, I think originally, by the time we were involved in it, we all knew who Pablo was, because Javier got to Colombia in 1988. I got there in 1991. The cases that I'd been working on in Miami, I think all were eventually tied into the Medellin cartel and Pablo. So we were already familiar when we got down there, but the fact that, you know, when you get there, I didn't know I was going to be working against Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel. You know, I was, Javier had a partner in Gary Sheridan at the time that you guys have been working it for 3 years. Well, Gary and I had some mutual friends and got to be friends, and that's how I got to be friends with Javier. And then Gary gets promoted and transferred, and it just made, you know, sense that Javier and I would partner up, full-time partners. Right. And it's been like that since 1991.
And Pablo, remember, his forte was South Florida, Miami especially. He had a lot of people working for him in the South Florida area. That was his home base. He concentrated, you know, I remember they called it, they used to code name it Las Palmas. Palm trees. Everybody knew it was Miami. You know, I remember we're sending 100 head of white cattle to Las Palmas. You know, 100 keys of coke to Miami. It was that simple.
And you learn the language eventually. You know exactly.
I mean, everything had a code name. They tried to hide it, but New York was Las Torres, the towers. You know, Mexico was Los Sombrerones. Big hats, like we're going to Los Sombrerones, everybody knew. So, but like I said, his forte was always Miami. That's where he had a lot of people working for him, the distributors, the guy who were receiving the loads, you know. But like I said, they had their contacts in Mexico also. I mean, they would send out coordinates where the airplanes would land in Mexico, and it was just, you know, unbelievable, but the amount of coke that was coming out.
So I noticed you guys give a lot of credit to Kiki, right? You kept giving credit to Kiki. What was his last name? Camarena, yeah. And he was on the cover of, what was it, Time magazine, that he was on the cover of Time, and he worked with the Guadalajara cartel that he was working on. Why was Kiki such a big, almost like a face, a hero to you guys in your world? Did he pave the way for you? What was the story behind him?
This was before we came on the job, so we're talking the early 1980s. But Kiki was trying to do basically what we eventually were trying to do in Colombia, and that's go up against these violent cartels. Kiki paid the ultimate price. You know, he was kidnapped by the police. He was tortured repeatedly. The reports that we heard was that he was killed several times, and they had a doctor that would inject adrenaline into his heart to bring him back to life so they could continue to torture him. We all know eventually he was murdered. And so then we saw the reaction of the United States government about Kiki's death. And at that time, our administrator was able to go to Capitol Hill and put the pressure at the White House so that for a very short period of time, the border between the United States and Mexico was closed because the Mexican authorities didn't want to cooperate with the United States investigation. In I think it was less than an hour, you know, they got a call from the Mexican government saying, okay, we're back in the investigation. We'll continue our investigation. Now, when we're involved with Narcos and the making of Narcos and working with Eric Newman and the writers, one of the things that Javier and I requested is that they put a reference in there to Kiki Camarena because he's a true American hero. You know, the whole Red Ribbon campaign in the United States is in honor of Kiki Camarena. So in our book, he's a true hero.
Wow.
Right. And like Steve said, Kiki Camarena is an idol. We've always idolized him, look up to him. I was a brand new agent and I was involved in that search. So I will always remember I got a call from our boss, Joe Todd, says, you know, I spoke Spanish. I was in Austin and I was involved for a couple of months in the search of Camarena. But like Steve said, they tortured the poor guy. They let him die in peace. They did not. They tortured him. And then one of the things that DEA did was we never gave up on finding the people. And I think we found pretty much everybody who was involved.
Here's my question for you. When you go up against a guy like Pablo, okay, and like I was saying earlier, if this is the threshold, he's willing to go here, right? And you, as a DEA, you're confined into certain things that you have to follow. Like you can't go past certain things they tell you. Now, at least this is what we see as a citizen from the outside. I'm not on the inside, because you hear both negative and positive. There's stuff that says don't even trust a government official, you know, about FBI, CIA, DEA. You hear all this stuff, right? If you're going up against a guy that's gonna cross the line, he's gonna cheat, no matter what. How do you beat a guy like that that's willing to cheat, that you're confined in some of the rules that you have to follow?
That's a really good question. And not to get on our soapboxes here, but in our lives, there are a few things that we actually control. You have 3 children, 3 small children, right? You make your plans, but then your child comes home and says, Dad, I've got a project due in the morning. Your whole evening's plans just changed. So there's a lot of things in our lives that we really don't control. We think we do, but we don't, because there's a lot of outside interferences. But there's absolutely one thing in every one of our lives that we control individually, and that is our integrity. Now, we'll tell you right up front, we broke rules, policies, and procedures on a regular basis in Colombia. We have never, never, never broken the law. We never stepped across that line.
How do you control that? Because let me explain to what I see from my standpoint, right? You cross the line with me on my family side, I'm sorry. You know, it's just, you know, this is blood, right? This guy's willing to go at all cost. How do you go up against that to match it? You know, it's very tough to match it. Like I remember one time, what did Reagan say? Reagan said, I don't negotiate with terrorists. Remember how that line, I don't negotiate with terrorists? Of course you're not going to negotiate with terrorists, because like, you either do this, I'm going to kill you. He's going to kill you no matter what. So this is not a regular guy you're facing. How does an organization like you match up against? And I'm not talking integrity-wise, because you know how in the series it shows Colonel Carrillo, right? That's not a real character. It's really Hugo Martinez. In the series, it shows the fact that there was one guy he was afraid of, and he was intimidated of because he could match his terror at that level. And a guy like that is always afraid of somebody that's willing to match that. How do you put the fear in a guy like him? Was the strategy to go after the cousin, the COO, Gustavo, so it kind of cripples him? That's the part I really want to know, because what you guys thought about.
Yeah, one of the best things that ever happened is that Steve and I lived at the search block base. The school was called the Carlos Holguin School, and it was in the middle of a neighborhood, so we slept there, we ate with and we had a specialized group of cops working with them. Like Steve said, we went out on operations pretty much every day, so we knew what was going on. We were trusted by our group, they trusted us. And
this is the Colombian group?
The Colombian, yeah, it's called the Dijín group of the Colombian National Police, the Dijín, D-I-J-I-N.
Is that considered their DEA, or is that their police?
It's their specialized unit, sort of investigative, plainclothes unit, their narcotic unit. And we knew this guy's working with them in Bogota, so they knew us. So
from different projects? Or
from different projects. So when Pablo Escobar, you know, they handpicked this guys, because they had picked some guys from Medellin, but you know, Pablo would get to their families. You know, they were corrupt, so they would tell Pablo, you know, when they were coming for him. So these guys all came from different areas. It was very interesting. At the beginning, there was a lot of phone calls being made. We credit Colonel Martinez came in and pretty much did not tell anybody, you know, where the operations were, just kept it at a select few. No phone calls from anywhere, load up at night, we're going here. You know, so we would have the convoy of trucks. The base was made up of uniformed police officers, also handpicked, and the investigative unit. So it was great, because the investigative unit would come back, boss, we think we got Pablo located. All right, uniformed officers, mount up. And they were from a group called Gaula, which was their specialized, it was jungle operation type guys. The concept, which is what I think DEA did right, was more of a world type concept where they said, Colombia, you go after Pablo Escobar in Colombia, United States, DEA, we're gonna go after Pablo Escobar wherever he's at, all over the world. Europe, Miami, New York, DEA. So our offices, which was a brand new concept, were instructed, you go after anybody that's associated with Pablo Escobar, which was great. So we were attacking him in the United States, and the Colombians were attacking him in Colombia. So this is the first time that we see a structure of an organization that you're gonna attack it at both sides.
I guess my question is the following question. When you take down a guy like that has to leave a certain playbook for the next person that possibly decides to be like that. Here's the process. We first do this, then we do this, then we do this. There's a system behind it, right? Like right now we have El Chapo. You're dealing with Joaquin El Chapo. I think it's Guzman is his last name.
Guzman.
So when you're going through Does that leave a playbook? And if it is, what is step number 1, 2, 3? Do you have a protocol for it?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking from an outside of myself, if I'm a guy that I wasn't in your world, step number 1, study everybody that he's close to him. Step number 2, who's his number 1 customer? Step number 3, who's his number 1 ally? Step number 4, is that the approach? Is it that methodical or not really?
You know what? You hit it right on the head. You just don't go after, all right, I'm going to go after Pablo Escobar. You target the money launderers, you target the guys who are buying the airplanes, you target the guys who are working the labs. In the United States, there's distribution heads all over the place that receive it. So it's a joint effort. You just don't say, I'm going after Chapo, I'm going after Pablo Escobar. You got to go after everybody that's involved in the organization for it to finally work. And I think a great example was at the end of the Medellin cartel. Pretty much everybody was taken off, everybody was killed. There's hundreds, thousands of people that went to jail that were working for Pablo Escobar. So it was a different concept.
You know, one of the things too, just to clarify a point, but also to give credit where credit's due, Javier and I get all the credit for Pablo Escobar. It wasn't just us. I mean, DEA just didn't take 2 guys and say, that's your case, go work on it. We had agents, analysts, support personnel all around the world, and that's one of the beauties of DEA having this huge footprint around the world.
How big was it at that time, Steve? How big was the DEA?
Agent-wise, there was only 3,500 agents back at that time.
Where is it right now, comparable?
It's supposed to be at 5,000, but I think they've got classes ongoing now trying to get to the level back up.
Yeah,
but
mid 5,000, pretty much what I've heard. Though. And you know what? We had the best analysts in the world. I mean, I remember they used to give us packages. Hey, here's this guy. Here are the associates. The analysts
from the states.
Yeah,
it's coming from the states to you.
Target packages.
Yeah.
And how does it
packages.
make it to you? Like, how are they communicating that to you? Was it a?
We had people assigned in Bogota. And then from headquarters, they would send it over, obviously electronically secure methods.
So here's a question. So was there ever a time where Pablo's military was stronger than Colombia's military? Like, was there ever a time where, because that's the scary part. If a citizen's military is stronger than yours, you desperately need some help, right? Did it ever get to that point?
Well, that first manhunt, you saw what happened. He negotiated a surrender to a self-built prison. Basically, he'd beat the government at that point. So he was as strong, if not stronger, than the government at that point.
And when that happened, you were pretty disappointed when that happened. You were kind of frustrated.
And I was there, and also there was a lot of killings going on during the first time because of the sicarios. There were a lot of, like I said, the bombs, the killings. And basically, Pablo's plan was to weaken Colombia. By weakening, I'm talking about I'm going to kill as many people as I can. That way, I will negotiate. That's what he always wanted. He wanted to negotiate his surrender. And one thing a lot of people miss or does not get brought up, and I'm just not sure why, but it's extradition. A lot of people do not know that his number 1 fight on Colombia, his number 1 fight in the start of terrorism was he did not want to get extradited to the United States.
Because he knew it'd be over at that time. That's when he offered the $10 billion to the government, say, we'll pay off your debt, just don't extradite me, right? Leave me alone and let me be.
Yeah, and he wanted to be, he wanted to be president of Colombia. He volunteered to pay off their debt. And we've always said, if Pablo Escobar was a good person, he would have been a great president.
So I want to finish up this thought here so we can transition into the next part. Go back to being in high school, okay? You're in high school. It helps you to have a cousin that's everybody's afraid of. It helps you to have a cousin or a friend or an older brother or somebody that you just, listen, you mess with Javi, Joey's coming. Did you guys have also somebody where you're like, okay, listen, we broke some rules all the time. We always had our integrity, but we broke the rules. But there was somebody that he was very scared of, where this guy could cross the line. In the movie, it's Colonel, Carrillo. But in real life, was there somebody that he was afraid of that could match his madness?
I think he was scared of Colonel Martinez.
And I agree. Colonel Martinez was the guy.
So he was. So Martinez is really, some of the stories of Martinez is Carrillo.
We're not saying Colonel Martinez by any means would have broken the law like Pablo. He was just incorruptible. And Pablo knew that. I mean, there was one instance at Colonel Martinez's apartment building that all the other residents in that apartment building signed a letter asking Colonel Martinez and his family to move out because they were afraid Pablo was going to blow up the building and they would be killed simply because Colonel Martinez lived there. So the man was incorruptible.
And he didn't move out. He stayed.
No, yeah, he stayed. And I saw him once break down. I saw him. We were at a meeting and
Emotion, like tears?
emotionally,
Really?
and he wanted out. I mean, he wanted out because Pablo was threatening his family, and basically said, "Hey, this is getting just way out of hand. It's too personal. My family." And at a weak moment, he wanted out. At a weak moment, he thought about it,
What brought him back?
came back, and did not give up. I've always admired that about him. I mean, here's Pablo Escobar trying to kill your family, and imagine being Pablo Escobar's worst enemy, which was Colonel Martinez.
So how come he didn't do anything to him?
There's a lot of protection. Colonel Martinez obviously, hid his family, but I think it
He did?
strengthened.
He moved out his family? Or
He hit him. He hit him, obviously, because Pablo was trying to kill him. There's a letter where he threatens Martinez. You know what? I think it just strengthened Martinez
His resolve.
to
Conviction,
himself.
I bet.
Yeah. The strategy from the police, and I think it's what really won the war against Pablo Escobar was, they used to tell us, hey, we're not here to seize money, we're not here to seize dope, we're here to get Pablo Escobar. So it was a different resolve. It was personal. And personal because of all the police officers that Pablo killed. I mean, if you look at the numbers of police officers that he killed, when he started bounties, we went to a funeral where in the church we had 8 coffins of police officers. And every day, the car bombs, the hiring people, the bounties on police officers. The search became a war because it got personal.
He announces that he wants to run for office. Not announces, but you kind of
And this
pretty
was
much
beforehand.
knew. This
This
was
was
beforehand.
beforehand, right.
Oh, so let me ask you, it got personal before he ran? And if it didn't seem like it got personal beforehand, right? It got personal afterwards.
It was afterwards. He got personal afterwards because of the people that he started killing. You saw the famous Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla.
But he killed him after what he said about him, right? So it wasn't. So I want to know, what was the part? Because here's, for the longest time, he was saying, I sell flowers. I have a flower business, right? And I'm an entrepreneur, and I have this and I have this. So people were kind of leaving him alone, right?
Right, and this was at the beginning. And
Right.
he used to go to Medellin. They loved him. People used to see him. It wasn't until I think really the mid-'80s that we started finding out that Pablo Escobar was responsible.
Did somebody, like, how you study a guy like Hitler? I mean, let's just say a guy like Hitler, and you say, what is wrong with a person to wake up one day to decide that he wants to go out there and, get rid of an entire, society, community? Now, what is wrong with you to do that? And then when you read the book Mein Kampf, or if you study his stories and all this other stuff, you realize there was a time that somebody hurt his ego. And it was not necessarily anything extravagant that you would think that somebody did something to his wife, family, kids. Someone crossed the line and hit his ego, and he says, I'm going to make this a life determination to go after it. Who hurt his ego publicly? Because in the movie, it's that one scene where you guys are sitting in the back, and after kind of doing a little due diligence, you guys weren't in there when he got up and he said, we've all taken money from him, I've taken money from him, and I'm telling you right now, Pablo Escobar, and Pablo's sitting there, the scene where he's getting the tie from the security guy and then he walks out. Was that the scene where he said, you're going to play with me and publicly humiliate me? Watch what I'm going to do to you. Was that kind of what happened?
It's sort of, but like I said, the TV series, I mean, there's some artistic licenses. I think what drove Pablo was, first of all, he did not want to get extradited to the United States. And second, he wanted to show Colombia that he was the boss, that he was going to negotiate, he was going to instruct Colombia on what his terms would be. Now, and if you, I'm glad you talked about, because we studied, we used to, the motivation was that greed. I mean, because if you look at the sentence that he got, 5 years in prison, billion, right? You're going to have billion, and you're only doing 5 years.
But if you look back to what led to that, when Lara Bonilla unveiled that mugshot of Pablo, that embarrassed him. He was embarrassed. He was sitting in Congress.
That's what it was.
So that embarrassed him
What
terribly.
year is that, by the way?
That was in the mid '80s.
Yeah, it was
yeah.
before
It's
my
a very
time.
iconic
Yeah.
photo. You see that photo, and you see that smile.
Smile.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you see
Yeah.
that smile.
Who
and
smiles
it's
in their
got
mugshot?
Yeah.
Pablo.
And we say, yeah, he was in jail for 5 minutes. 5 minutes, he gets out.
You see sometimes, somebody is making their money and they want power, they want fame. And then if they really go through the tipping point, humiliate them publicly, now you see a different side of them. And sometimes the ego for some people is so big that you cross that line, you're going to get a pretty bad enemy coming after you for a while, right? You got to be prepared for that.
Right, you got to be prepared. And this is why I think he started with the violence, with killing as many people as possible. I listened to him on the phone one day, and he's talking to his wife. I'll never forget that conversation, telling her how much he loves her. We're intercepting the phone, and I love you, I miss you. This was during the search.
Mm-hmm.
In the background, you hear a guy yell. It's a shriek. He covers the phone, says, cover his mouth. In other words, they're torturing a guy
While he's on the phone with his wife.
while he's on the phone and telling her how much he loves her and how much he misses her. That was like, wow. I mean, how do you change, your emotions that fast? It was 2 3 seconds. I love you, baby. I miss you. And then there's a guy who's yelling. They're torturing the guy, and he's witnessing it. And it's just, how does that happen?
So there are some studies that say that this guy said he's going to be a president a long time ago. Like he had aspirations on winning. So it's not like it happened once he started making money. Where does this motivation come from for this ambitious guy? You study his parents. One was a teacher. It's
One
not
was a
like
farmer.
one was a farmer. Like what is the fire? Where is that fire coming from? Did you see some stuff that maybe we don't know about?
The famous photo, and I think too he was shunned by the Colombian government because he was an associate, they call them suplentes, congressman, and I think it was Galan, Luis Carlos Galan, who found out he was a trafficker. So he was ousted. So, I mean, he is publicly embarrassed by the Colombian government. So you're ousting me, I'll show you. In my opinion, that's all it was. I'm gonna show you. You disgraced me.
When you go back to Alexander, you study that he had a father that kind of was a drunkard, and he wasn't around, and his mother would feed a lot of stuff into his mind. One day you're gonna be this, one day you're gonna conquer the world, one day you're gonna do this pardon. He had a very interesting combination between his mom and his dad, right, on who he became.
Right.
There was an Aristotle that was feeding into his mind on how to be a leader. So there was a perfect combination of 3 different characters in his life. Do you know of people that were in his ear that were, because I know his wife would always say, you can one day be a president, you can one day be a president, but who else was in his ear?
His mother was the main. His father really wasn't involved. He was a farmer, kept to his, cows. It was the mother who always kept telling him what to do. The wife was also, she knew about the business, of course, but I think it was more of his mother telling him the directions of what he needed to do.
Well, I was thinking just earlier before that, as he's just coming up as a fledgling criminal, I think he realized how much money there was to be made in the drug business and how simple it was. His first reported drug deal was for, I think it was 17 kilos. And the person, when he saw how quickly he could move that, how much money he could make, he went and killed that person. So that stepped him up one ladder, one rung on that ladder towards the top of the ladders, which is where he wanted to go. Now, what helped him is he had no remorse, he had no compunction, he had no guilt feelings whatsoever about killing people. He was just doing business. And so when you've got that type of, that psyche and that mentality, I think that had a lot to do. And then as you get more powerful and more wealthy, you think you're important now. And that's where he decided, okay, now I want to move into Congress. Now I want to be president. Now I want this, now I want that.
The only reason I ask is because sometimes you see, you look at Frank Lucas from American Gangster,
Right,
the movie.
right.
He had his boss that was putting a lot of inspiration into him. He had somebody to watch. Who was Pablo's example? Like, who was Pablo following to say, I'm following this guy's footsteps? Was there anybody?
Yeah, in the history of the cartel, you had Jose Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, who was more powerful than Pablo Escobar, was richer, because Gacha had taken over the emerald business. There's a famous massacre in Colombia, everybody knows about it, where he killed off the competition, Gilberto Molina. So he took over that. And how Gacha came up with the concept of the cocaine labs in Colombia. So after Gacha gets killed, Pablo takes over that organization. But my question has always been, How does Pablo rise to that CEO when you're dealing with the most major traffickers in Colombia, right? I mean, you got the most ruthless, you got the biggest, baddest traffickers. How do you become boss?
Is that still a question? Is it still a question till today for you, or no?
Yes,
Has that
yes,
been
it is,
answered?
because no, I mean that has always been my question. How did he rise?
it. So
you have other major traffickers all listening to Pablo Escobar.
See, that's what I'm
Wow,
wondering, because
I mean,
if you look at the Cali brothers, you knew they were just driven by money. They were business guys. So to them, it was a different story, right? And sometimes for people, it's just money, fame is all it is. Very few people have that big of an aspiration like a Pablo does. It has to be something deeper. By the way, what happens if Pablo doesn't have the aspirations of running for office? Does his legacy continue? Or would it eventually still stop? Let's just say Pablo says, you know what? I don't want to run for office. I want to be a low-key guy. I just want to take these 15 facilities that I have that were producing cocaine, a ton of cocaine a day. Let's make it 30, let's make it 40, let's make it 50. Maybe let's go to other countries. Let's make it in different places. How much bigger would he have gotten if he had zero aspirations of being a political leader?
I think he would never have been capable of doing what you're suggesting. Says, let me do low key, because that ego he had, that personality, when you study him, when you listen.
There inside his custom-built prison, he had a Salvador Dali original, probably worth a couple $1 million hanging on the wall. There's a famous artist in Colombia, Fernando Botero, who's extremely well known. He has a Botero original hanging on the wall. It's worth about $1.5 million. And this was in 1991, 1992.
Right. As Steve mentioned before, that charisma he had, that is very accurate. He'd go down and he would recruit his own sicarios. A lot of people do not know that. Yeah, there was a famous church.
Convert, right? He would convert a lot of people.
There was a famous Catholic church in Medellin, one of the poorest neighborhood churches, and he would have meetings and he would come in. And all these young thugs, 14, 15-year-olds, they'd hug him, he'd kiss them, give them money. And that was the allegiance, that was, you're the biggest trafficker and you're going down yourself.
That's interesting what you're
saying.
saying.
That just shows that personal, what you're talking about, that ego, that
and here's the
personality.
scenario. So he goes into this neighborhood where people are literally living on the edge of a trash dump. That's where their food comes from. That's where their clothing comes from. Their cardboard and pieces of wood that they create a little living shelter. He comes in and he builds low-cost housing and lets people live there for free. He provides them with food. He builds medical clinics, soccer fields. He gives them money. He gives them food. So think about it. Now, if you come from a situation like that, and now all of a sudden your mom's got a roof over her head, she's got a lock on her door, so you get a little bit of security, you got running water, you've got electricity, what are you going to think about the guy?
But I mean, this isn't anything new, right? If you want to get the vote, go get all the poor people and give them free food, give them free place to live, and you're going to get their votes.
And so here's the point. That's not a Robin Hood, which that's the persona everybody seems to want to portray him. He wasn't a Robin Hood for these people. He manipulated those people, because when he needed his new sicarios, where did he go back to?
There is a part of it where this whole Robin Hood theory came about, because I think when Pablo died, 25,000 people showed up and they just wanted to touch his face. They wanted to. He was like glorified when he passed away.
They broke the coffin out of the morgue. They're parading him on the streets.
Does that make you upset when you see that? Like, because
it doesn't, because I mean, this is history. It happened.
It doesn't now.
Well,
or
I mean,
it doesn't
no.
at that time.
No, at
emotionally,
that time,
you're so
emotionally,
vested.
we lost a lot of friends that were killed by Pablo Escobar. And the innocent people, I hated Pablo Escobar, but people love him. You know what? It's a way of life. Colombia's a safe country. It's a beautiful place. Medellin,
people are so
beautiful
nice,
people. And you know what? We got to say, 99.9% of Colombians are great, innocent, hard-working people. It's that little 1% of the traffickers that ruin it, But
Still
Medellin,
till today, is a lot of it still today, or no?
Yep, and you know what? We don't tell too many people, but we, visit Medellin. The only thing you cannot do in Medellin, do not badmouth Pablo Escobar in Medellin.
Till today.
He still has a lot of loyal followers.
Till today.
Wow. So the legend continues.
Still love him.
So I've seen you say this, that what we saw in Narcos, the jail was nice, but you're saying the jail was. So what was this jail like that he chose to build? What was it like?
It was very much like a country club. So what Pablo calls a jail cell is a 2-room suite. The bathroom has a jacuzzi tub, walk-in closet, a safe hidden behind the drawers in his walk-in closet. On the back side where you hang your long clothes, There was a wall, there was a coletta back there, a hidden space. And so you push the button and the back wall pops open. There's a place to jump in there and hide. In the main room, which was a kitchen and living room combination, he had a microwave oven, full-size refrigerator, nice banana bar with the bar stools. He had color-coordinated draperies and upholstery, which is, you look at it now, it's a little bit gaudy, but that's not what you'd expect to see in a prison cell. He had the $1 million pieces of art hanging on the wall, candles on the tables. You go into the bedroom, a custom-built bed bigger than any king-size bed you've ever seen. His audiovisual center they didn't have cable TV and satellite TV and Netflix and things like that back then, but he did have all the latest releases of TV shows and movies from all around the world. He had a fireplace in behind his desk in his office area. He had pictures hanging on the wall. One of the things, if he's this devoted family man, when you came into the living room portion, he took his wanted poster and had that framed hanging on the wall, not pictures of his family. And then when you get behind his desk, he took all of his mug shots and had those matted and framed in a collection because it's
I can
really
see
nice,
him being like that, though. I can see
He
that.
had a collection of letters, folders,
Letters?
from people that would write him saying he was a great guy. There was one letter, and we talked about it. It was from a lady who's offering her daughter to come to the prison and entertain Pablo Escobar. Ain't that sickening?
To have his love child.
Yeah.
She was 13 years old.
He was saved. And
Pablo
that
was
just,
24 when he first started dating his
Right,
wife, and wife
yeah.
was 13. So
Right.
that's...
But it just goes back to what you're talking about Pablo's persona. He kept all the letters that people would write to him.
So was he a womanizer?
Yeah, there's parties, and we make a little joke. I mean, there was a lot of orgies at the prison. Now that in itself doesn't make him a bad guy, right? But that's a joke. That's a joke, guys.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was
coming
a lot
from
of,
you because the way let me say this though, the way Narcos is presented, Javier, it's a whole different ballgame with you. You look like you were a step away from being a porn star in Hollywood. I mean, that's how they presented you.
I know.
Let me ask you, when you were watching some of those girls that play those roles, were you like, I don't know if she looked like her? She looked a little better than her.
You know what I say? You know what? I wish that would have been true. I wish that would have happened.
Can I play this role today, even though
Just
it's
a little
really
joke
me?
with DA guys. A lot of times, they'll say, here, man, now my wife thinks I'm sleeping with our reformers because
bet.
So that's all Hollywood.
But you also were never married, right?
I was single at the time. I was single, but that's Hollywood. But that's kind of funny.
So you were having a good time in Colombia.
I was single, but I didn't date, communist informants. I mean, it's and you know what? It was.
Listen, you made time.
Yeah,
You made time to have your extracurricular
So
activity.
this is my partner. I got to take up for him. He was not dating communists, hookers, or informants.
right.
But
What
like I
does it
say,
matter?
every other woman in Colombia was fair game.
So would you ask the girl, what is your political beliefs? Do you believe in capitalism or communism? I can't have sex with you if you believe in communism. So he was a womanizer. He was a party guy. You were talking about the orgies, all this other stuff.
I remember a lot of negligees at
Was
the
he a big
prison.
user himself? Was he a big user?
Marijuana.
He liked marijuana. I didn't
He
see anything
really
about
didn't.
cocaine with
Yeah,
him.
we never heard, people would never, but a lot of marijuana use. And then, how do you get the Colombian soccer team to come play at the prison? The national soccer team. We found photos. There's a famous goalie. A lot of people remember the guy with the dreadlocks, Rene Guita.
The guy that kicked it from that's the guy that kicks it from.
That's the auto goal. That guy was killed later
You're
on.
talking about in the World Cup when Colombia scored against itself.
Yeah.
He's talking about a
Escobar.
different guy.
I'm talking about
By the way,
prison.
does that killing have anything tied to Pablo or no?
Yes. Matter of fact, the
player that got killed.
It was a guy by the name of Jesus Gallon, and a lot of documents. I think he was finally arrested. He worked for Pablo Escobar. This guy was one of the distributors. The death was all not accidental. The death was just at a bar. One of the traffickers lost a lot of money because of you, and that was it. It wasn't a planned hit.
It wasn't premeditated.
Yeah, it wasn't premeditated. They were at a bar because of your auto goal, remember?
But linked back to Pablo?
Yeah, because this guy used to work for Pablo
Got it.
Escobar.
So one of Pablo's
in
people
essence,
took-
yeah.
It's indirectly.
Yeah,
Got it.
indirectly.
Interesting. So now his compound where he lived, this whole story about zoos, he built 20 lakes, some astronomical number of cars he owned.
That
Just
is accurate.
insane. Is
The
that
famous
really?
Finca Nápoles was his pride and joy, and we have a lot of photos. Steve talks about it, but that was his headquarters before he was on our radar. That's when they had the parties, people would fly in. We had a lot of, I remember talking to traffickers in the States, pilots. They'd fly in, meet with Pablo, they'd load up the airplanes. And that was his love. He had a bullfighting ring there. He had a zoo, all the exotic animals. He had a playground with giant dinosaur statues for the kids. It was just cool phenomenal. And remember, you got the money of the world.
Yeah, no doubt.
And all of these traffickers, what are they trying to do to other traffickers? They're trying to tell them, I have more than you do. That's why they will display it, So
It's like a competition between each other.
Constantly. Let me ask you, you know how sometimes you see names like this and you see Hollywood celebrities, people like that who want to party with some names like this. Was there any of that going on in Colombia where celebrities from U.S. were coming down to Colombia to party with them, or that wasn't really the case with you guys when you were out there?
I don't remember hearing about U.S. celebrities coming down, but it wasn't unusual for him to have like former Colombian beauty queens come in for parties and things like that.
Beauty queens.
Yeah, beauty queens.
Politicians that were on the payroll.
A lot of politicians came into the ranch. We never saw celebrities.
So let me ask you, going back to the power play with what happened with Gustavo, do you think, like pre-Gustavo, post-Gustavo getting killed, who was Pablo pre, who was Pablo post? Meaning, did he lose a lot of his confidence after Gustavo was gone?
Gustavo Gaviria was surrounded. Come out with your hands up. Comes out with a machine gun. We wanted him alive because we wanted him in the United States because of this guy had the connections all over the world, but he chose to come out fighting. It was difficult for Pablo to get, but he got organized, but one thing, and he never forgave for the killing of his cousin. Remember, they were brothers. They were more than brothers. They were always together. And Gustavo was, I think, more of the common sense type guy. Pablo, what's the famous line? You're spending too much money, or you're making too much money?
And he tells you just to launder more money. This is in Narcos. He tells you to launder more money. He said, we can't. And he said, isn't that what Al Capone did?
Well, yeah, he said, ain't that what Al Capone did? And Gustavo said a great line. Al Capone never had this much money.
Yeah.
That is a great line, But it was that type. Gustavo was always the grounding Pablo, calm down. And I remember stories where the other traffickers, the Ochoas, would say, Pablo, and the Ochoas, it's an interesting phenomenon. They were different. They were already rich, but they liked, selling dope. But basically, don't kill important people. They would try to tell them this is going to cost us, for them to come after us. And they were right. That's what caused them to come after Pablo Escobar. You know what? And you're talking about, Pablo Escobar's ego, that power. I remember, and this is a great example. We took during one of the raids, we took one of the cars, and he belonged to his sister. So we took the car in the dashboard. And I have a copy of that note. Basically, there was a note that says, if you're thinking of stealing this car, do not. This is Pablo Escobar, and this car belongs to my sister. Avoid problems. Ain't that a great life insurance
policy?
Did it
really have it on there?
Yeah, I saw it. It's written and signed by Pablo Escobar. Avoid problems. That's the best insurance a car could ever have.
I mean, you see that name right there. People probably felt safer if they had him as a backing. So if you saw a name there, nobody wanted to mess with him across.
No.
So the numbers I read about are the following numbers. Is it more or less than this? He killed the presidential candidate. That's one.
Luis Carlos Galan.
He killed the Minister of Justice.
Laura
right?
Bonilla.
He killed the Attorney General. Okay. Mm-hmm. He killed, some numbers say 1,000 cops. Some numbers say 3,000 cops. I think his son, Sebastian Marroquin, a.k.a. Juan Pablo Escobar, said, my dad in 1 week killed 500 cops. This is his son saying this, that in 1 week he killed 500 cops. And then thousands of people, and we were talking about earlier where you hear the number and some say he killed 5,000 people, some killed 10,000 people, and then Popeye, who was his number one hitman, who's got by the way, he's got a YouTube channel. It's so strange. This guy's got a YouTube channel with 600,000-700,000 subscribers. And he claims that Pablo, he himself killed 300 people for Popeye that he was assigned to kill, but he said Pablo killed in 50,000 people. So as vicious as Narcos series made it to us, was it even more vicious than that? Like, I know you watched the show, and you sit there and say, this is not even close, or was it pretty close to it?
Narcos did not get that right,
Right.
and you always said that. Steve says that,
Narcos
and I
did not
believe
get that right.
There was more violence, it was more vicious, it was more assassinations. You know, when you're talking about people, you miss one of the also newspaper editor, Guillermo Cano.
That's
if
right.
you do the research, he's the one who writes an op-ed piece. Fellow Colombians, we need to bring back extradition. Escobar kills him for
Yep.
writing that op-ed piece on extradition.
Yeah, so the violence that's shown in Narcos, like my sister, when she started watching it, she couldn't watch it past, I think, the second episode originally because of the language and the violence, but I think eventually she did watch the whole thing. But as bad as Narcos portrays the violence in Colombia under Pablo Escobar's reign, it was a lot worse than that. And that's...
What do you mean by that, though? Like, what you say that? Give us an idea of how much worse. Because it doesn't get any worse than some of the stuff he's doing.
And if you go back, look at the car bombs. That's where I always tell people, the car bombs. And you know what? We had never, what's a car bomb? I've never heard. You know, I mean, you see it, you know, you used to see it up, in other parts of the world. But then, you know, when you were putting them on a daily basis, 10, 15 car bombs on a daily basis, shopping centers. That to me was an all-out, I don't care who dies. This is my war on Colombia and really the rest of the world, on us too, on the United States. I'm going to basically bring you down to your knees.
And when he would kill people, it wasn't just, shoot them in the head and move on. He had them tortured. When he was going after somebody, especially a political figure, he not only killed them, just like Laura Bonilla, he was going after the entire family.
Very common. This was very common when it was happening.
It was common.
It's like everyday practice.
Yeah.
Was it every day you're seeing somebody getting killed or somebody?
Every day there was something new, and you would say, what else can he do? That, your imagination, you could not even fathom, the famous commercial airline. The kidnappings were, a lot of people were being kidnapped, and there's a famous lady by the name of Diana Turbay. Her dad used to be the president of Colombia. She was a journalist. He kidnapped a lot of journalists, that way they could write and say, Pablo Escobar's a good person, he's looking, please, Colombia, let him have whatever he wants.
So that's not the reporter, right? That's not the Valerie or
no.
Because that's, by the way, that's a real character. Her name is
Right.
Virginia
Vallejo, yeah.
which looks like her twin, and she's dropped it gorgeous in real life based on some of the pictures you see. She looks like they're related. And so was she really having a relationship with Pablo?
Yeah, she was one of his girlfriends. And remember, he liked press people so he could convince them to write good about him. That's why he wanted all the
Not much has changed from
kidnap,
today. Today, business people buy press companies so they can write good things about them. So not much has changed. So if Pablo didn't cross the line with that and he was in business, and his style of doing business wasn't to kill people, except put competition out of business, how good would have Pablo done in business as a CEO?
I just don't want to give the guy credit.
I know you don't. So
you tend to think that he probably would have done a good job in a legal business, but his business model is based on violence. You can't employ that in a legal business and be successful. So I don't know. I just don't want to give him credit and say, yes, he would have been successful.
So I will say it, if he would have been the guy so litigious, he'd be suing everybody to find his way getting to the top. I can see that possibly taking place.
You're right. You're right.
So, by the way, as you guys are going through, were there any stories related to presidents, Bush, Reagan, Clinton? Was anything happening that maybe wasn't covered in the series of Narcos? Was there anything outside of that?
Yeah, it was really, I remember President Bush when he was the vice president, and when we started seeing the violence in Miami. Remember all the violence and, Scarface, remember the Scarface movie? I mean, that was pretty accurate. I mean, there are a lot of people were getting killed in South Florida. A lot of bodies, the famous Dateland Mall massacre. Remember the 1 o'clock? We started seeing Colombians killing Colombians in the middle of the day. It's like, what is going on? Then in South Florida, bodies started coming up all over the place, and it was Colombians. And basically, I think under President Bush, he was the vice president, he says, man, hey, we have a problem here in South Florida. Then they started looking at all the money that was being invested in Miami, the famous buildings, the famous banks that were taking all the money, and says, we need to do something about it. So he created a task force.
South Florida Task Force.
The South Florida Task Force, which was the beginning. And from there, it led on to, and then from there, the pressure was being put on Colombia to bring back extradition.
I was about to ask
But
about
now-
extradition.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's how
that's why he was so concerned.
yeah, extradition, bring it back. And then you see in Colombia, you have certain people that are saying, wow, maybe we need to bring back extradition because we cannot handle Pablo Escobar. So what happened to those people? Pablo Escobar killed.
Had to.
Laura Bonilla, the newspaper editor. So this is why this whole war from Pablo Escobar was based on extradition.
So the one question that I think even till today is not fully answered. There isn't really anyone that has 100% answer. This is what happened, right? Anybody. A lot of people say different stories, and we have to almost take their word for it. It's like faith. You know, you haven't seen God, but you believe there is a God, right? So, and based on what I've read, I see three different stories. One of the stories is that Pablo was killed by the Colombian police, okay? Because that's who killed him. At the end, somebody put a bullet through his head because, you know, he was shot 3 times, one in the torso, one in the leg, and one through the ear. That went from one ear, came out of the other ear, right? When you see the picture, you kind of see the autopsy, you see how that looks. Okay, so number one, Colombian police is who killed Pablo. Now, obviously, as a nation, you want that to be number one because Colombia needs that victory. The second scenario you hear about, he was killed by a Delta Force, you know, Navy SEAL, you know, team from the top. You know, I have friends from Delta Force and they know what they're doing. A sniper can be up there knowing exactly where he's at and take him out, and they're pretty sharp at what they do. So for somebody to get him straight through the head is not a difficult thing to do. But then that would be the victory of America if Americans killed him. Number 3 is what Sebastian Marroquin talks about when he says, I know my dad was committing suicide because my dad always told me, you know, if they come to you, no one's going to kill me. If you have a gun with 15 bullets, 14 are used to kill the enemy. 1 is used to kill yourself, because no one should be able to kill yourself. No one should be able to kill you. And that's why he says, my dad called me 7 times. That's the story. Call me once, I wouldn't pick up because I knew if I picked up, they're going to know where my dad's at. Second time, I didn't pick up. Third time, I didn't pick up. Fourth time, I didn't pick up. He said, I finally picked up on the 7th time. My dad dragged out the conversation with he and I, and that's when all of a sudden this thing happened. So I know for a fact my dad committed suicide. So it's not the Colombian victory, it's not the US victory. So now, you've been asked this question 1,000,000 times. You've spoken in front of YPO, EO, government organizations here in the States, outside of the States. You've spoken to DA agents. You've spoken all over the world. And you probably get this asked all the time. What's your version of the answer?
Okay, let's address the second one first, whether it was a U.S. special operator, whether it was Delta Force or SEAL Team 6. I know that it wasn't, because when the operation went down, as the operation is taking place, I'm standing in the room with all the U.S. operators. Now, I'm certainly not taking anything away from it. Javier and I love these guys to death. These are the guys
They were not there.
They were at the base with me. And the reason I know is because I was there with them. Not taking anything away from them, because these are the best guys in the world. If we're ever kidnapped...
Every one of them was with you, Steve?
Yep. Right there in that room.
And let me just interject. The orders was that they could not leave the base. And this is coming from the Pentagon to the embassy. And these guys obey. They were at the base. And Steve was there, but I just want to put a caveat. They helped us. I mean, after Escobar gets in, they help us in a lot of the electronic messaging. A lot of training was done by them, but they could not leave the base. And that would upset them. But I mean, and like Steve said, these guys are great, great heroes.
So to you, you're 100% there. It's not a Delta Force or SEAL Team 6.
No doubt in my mind.
No doubt in your mind, that's it.
And believe me, we love these guys.
Yeah.
So we're not taking anything away from them.
So you are set that you think the Colombian police is who killed him?
Absolutely. Now let's look at that third theory about the suicide.
Yeah.
That's absolutely not true. Javier and I were local police officers before we became federal agents. I went through the academy. I was trained on murder investigations, suicide investigations. I worked both when I was in uniform. So all the photographs that were taken of Escobar on the roof that day after he was killed, I took those photographs. My primary responsibility, my instructions from my boss back at the embassy in Bogota was to confirm this is Pablo Escobar. You got to get up close and personal to do that. The blood and the guts and the gore and things like that don't bother me for whatever reason, so I was able to get close enough to look at the body. When there's a suicide by a gun, when you fire a weapon, there are little pieces of gunpowder that come out the end of that barrel. They travel a certain distance before they lose their velocity and fall to the ground. If you shoot yourself in the ear with a gun, the gunpowder that comes out of that barrel is certainly going to travel that far, and it will leave burn marks in the skin. You can go online and look at these photographs. Nobody has ever, I couldn't find them, there are no powder burns on the side of
Colonel
Pablo's
Martinez said as well.
face at all.
Yeah.
So that tells me it wasn't a suicide. So your first theory was the Colombian National Police. That's absolutely who it was. You know, we worked with these guys, we lived with them, never caught them lying to us about anything.
What difference would it make? Let me ask you this. Let's just say it's not the Colombian National Police. Let's say he committed suicide. If he did, would that take away the victory of you guys killing him and the victory goes to you? Is that, let's just say if it is, let's just say we come out and say this guy did kill himself. Would that make a difference?
You know what? Yes, it would.
I appreciate
If
you
he
saying
committed-
that.
Yes, I mean, it would because, like I said, look at the long time you went after this guy. Look at all the people he
Yeah.
killed. Look at all the massacres, the violence, and then he committed suicide. That, like Steve said, that wasn't the case. It was the search block, and not the regular Colombian
Yeah.
National Police. Colonel Martinez and his groups. Colonel Martinez was not there.
Right.
Yeah, and for the record, let me get my situation, because I think in the movie, in the series, they put me, I'm getting disciplined back in Washington. I won, the ambassador called me up and sent me to Miami. There was the famous informant Navigante, he was the one responsible for Gacha. How he got a hold of the ambassador, I think I know how. But anyway, so the ambassador calls me out of Medellin, says, Javier, get on a plane, you're going to Miami. I said, sir, because there's an informant that's going to tell you where Escobar is, sir. We were very close. It was like the day before.
You're telling him, sir, we're very close.
Yeah, we're very close, sir. He's not anywhere. They thought he was in Haiti. I said, he's right here in Medellin. And I get ordered. And ambassadors, this was a strong-willed ambassador. Ambassador's like a president. He says, you will get on a plane. So I got on a plane. And ironic, it is great, because I get to Miami, and you know how I found out Pablo Escobar gets killed?
How?
The informant is on a phone. The guy who's supposed to tell me where Escobar was. He says, Javier, they just killed Pablo Escobar.
Oh,
It's the irony.
what is your reaction when that happened, Bobby?
Of course I was like, and at least Steve was there, and you know what? He always had a camera, and anyway, those photos would not exist if Steve wasn't there. So I get on the plane back, and it's all the press people on that plane. I'll never forget the Univision, the Telemundo, people I see, the anchors. It is full of press people coming back to Colombia.
Can you
I
imagine
go there the next day,
Can you imagine what kind of field day they would have had with
No,
Javier on that
he would
airplane
be-
if they'd known who he was?
But that's the irony. But you know what? I was happy, of course. I went the next day. Steve was there. Congratulated everybody.
Did you see the body?
No, never did. Talked to all the guys. Congratulations. You know what I'm saying? It was a victory for them. I think more for Colombia because of all the criticism that they got. It was a victory for us, for all the people he killed, all our friends. I lost some good friends. So it was a victory for everybody. I didn't have to be there. Like Steve was there, but it was just something great. It was, the weight of the world had been lifted on. There was times, remember, when we'd say, man, I just hope he surrenders. Let's get it over. Let's all go home. It was that bad.
So let me ask you, was there ever a feeling of, was there, how you hear some stories, I wanted to be a millionaire so bad, and then I became a millionaire. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a millionaire. So what? I want to win this so bad. And then to some, they're like, I don't know if it's going to feel that bad because I'm so much hungry about the chase and the hunt versus actually it becoming a reality. You feel like, now what? Did you ever have that feeling, or was it like, finally we got this, bastard? You can use a different word if you choose to. Was there that feeling of, we got him?
There was that feeling because it felt like the weight of the world was lifted off our shoulders.
Yeah.
But, and we're not trying to be overly humble when we say this, that was one investigation. So when you complete an investigation, you move on to the next case. And that's exactly what we did. Once Escobar's gone, of course, my wife and I, we came back to the United States for Christmas vacation. you know, we came back to Bogota in early January. It's time to go back to work and work the next case.
How much of a break did you have after, you know, December 2nd?
Well, there was a lot of
1990.
loose ends that had to be tied up, you know, so it took us several months, and I think we probably worked on it until I transferred out in June.
And I left in about October. But when we were there was a lot of pressure from the United States. From, you know, DOJ, from
To you.
DEA, to us. Yeah.
To get it done or to?
To get it done, of course. You know, a lot of people don't know, but there was, we'd get calls, like we had to go brief people up in Washington.
What would they tell? Like, how much longer do we need? And what is going on?
No, and also, what else do you need?
Right.
What else do you need?
They were
it was
supportive,
great,
but they wanted action.
Yeah, and because everybody knew Pablo Escobar, the fight against him from the United States, there was a lot of pressure being put on us to go after Pablo Escobar, to get him.
Now, the picture, obviously the famous picture that you took, right? When you see that picture today, what's your reaction?
I'm proud of it now. I mean, when I got there and was taking the photographs of the police officers, you know, standing over the body, and then they start grouping up and want to group photos, and I mean, Javier and I, these are our friends, you know, these are the guys that we faced death with and survived. You know, it's a very close bond with each other. And they're saying, Steve, come on over. Well, they actually call me Stick. And they're like, Stick, come and get your photograph. So I, you know, gave somebody a camera and got in there and got my photo. You know, probably not my proudest moment at the time, but that was the elation that everybody felt that this guy was dead.
Did you get some criticism for the pic or no?
Oh, yeah.
You did?
Washington was not happy about that picture at all.
Washington wasn't happy. Now, was the Colombian government not happy, or they could care less? It was mainly Washington.
The cops were okay with it. I don't know about the rest of the government.
So anybody that's a Pablo fan probably wasn't too happy about that picture being.
Yeah, and it was never meant to be released. Somebody in the Colombian National Police released it, is how it got out. But, you know, I don't have any remorse. I don't have any guilt feelings about it. The reason we're all smiling as pictures is because we all knew, effective immediately at the second that Pablo died, every citizen in the country of Colombia is safer, simply because one man's gone. And if you go back and do your research, you'll find out that the murder statistics support that theory.
80% is the number
Almost
I saw when I was, 80% the following year.
Because one man was gone.
Can you imagine the power of one man dropping the amount of activity by 80%?
It's unbelievable.
That is unbelievable. What do you guys do? Is there a ritual you have every year on December 2nd? Do you guys do something on December 2nd every year?
Drink a lot of beer.
But is it a call like, hey, do you remember?
We have
there's an
intel analyst who was assigned to Pablo Escobar. He sends him an email, happy anniversary.
Every year.
He commemorates it.
Every year.
And like you said, we do a shout out for our analysts because they did a great job. And when you go after these traffickers, you need that intel. It's not like, you know, in the movies, you need all that intel work to help you go after them.
That's it.
And thank you to Craig for that annual reminder.
Now, question to you, I asked you this earlier, but I want everybody also to know this, is from the outside, you know, when you watch it, Narcos does a great job showing that you guys became very good friends. Till today, how strong is your friendship? How strong is the bond between the two of you?
We talk pretty much every day.
we see each other. Last year we did 82 appearances around the world. I see Javier as much as I see my wife, if not more.
So family to you.
Yeah, we're going to Ireland here in
we've got a UK tour coming up here for a 2-week tour.
Yeah,
and have you yet seen the whole thing? Have you yet seen Narcos?
Not yet. I've seen the first series. I saw the third one. Number 2, I'm waiting. I'll watch it.
So still emotionally, you can't.
Yeah. I mean, it just brings back, like you said, I lost some good friends of mine, you know, and and this is why when we say Pablo Escobar was a revenge, of course it was. I'd be lying if it wasn't.
You've said it in every time I've studied you, you keep saying that was a revenge. Like it was I want to kill this guy.
Yeah.
We tell the truth.
Yeah, did you want him alive or you wanted him dead?
I wanted him dead.
Yeah, me too. I do. Yeah, he would have. Anyway.
Did the U.S. government want him alive, or they could care less? We want this guy dead as well.
Nobody ever came out and told us,
kill him. Just do your job.
Do your job.
Also known as kill him is what you got to do. Well, you know, I sit there and I watch your story, and I'm always curious when I see somebody that becomes a DA agent and decides to go take your life. We were with Joe Pistone recently. Joe Pistone was Donnie Brasco. He worked with the Italian mob, and he worked heavily on taking on the Bonanno family and partially the Colombo family. And for 6 years, he was undercover. And when I hear your story, you were married at the time. Your wife was living in Bogota, right? And you'd be gone. I think one time you said you were gone for 5 weeks to Medellin. You were away from your wife. How did you make that work? Because his marriage is still intact, Joe's, which I cannot believe. and apparently yours is as well. What was the secret? What system did you guys have to make your marriage work?
I just married the right woman. You know, she understood my desire for excitement, and you know, we were much younger, and we just liked exciting things. But you know what? She liked it just as much, because when we were in Miami, you know, I had one partner there that was shot in a deal gone bad, and an informant killed, and just a lot of activity going on in Miami in the '80s. And after 4 years in Miami, she came to me one day. She said, "This has been exciting. What's the next most exciting thing we can do?"
That's amazing.
And I threw out the idea of going to Colombia. It took her a little while for her to come to grips with it, but finally she came one day and she said, "If we're going to do it, let's do it while we're young."
When we were having lunch earlier today, and I was, Mario asked you, the producers, did they think it was going to be this big of a hit as it became on Netflix?
Well, I think the producers did, but Javier and I, we didn't think anybody wanted to hear this story. We turned down a couple of producers before Eric Newman came along. So when we say, and we say this all the time, but it's absolutely true, no one is more shocked by the popularity of Narcos than us.
How much did your life change when the documentary came out? Like pre-Narcos, after, not the documentary, the series. How much did your life change?
180 degrees, right? We never dreamt we'd be doing this in retirement. We didn't ever have the opportunity to meet you and the crew here if it weren't for
we're
Narcos.
traveling the world, we're traveling places we never would have gone. So it's had a, very adverse effect, from being retired, doing nothing, and all of a sudden the series comes out. And I saw the first one, I said, no one's going to watch it, And then all of a sudden, man, wow, we're starting to, and it's, you know what?
We got to go speak in Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan. We went to Sydney, Australia, and we got to speak at the Sydney Opera House and sold it out.
No way.
I mean, this is just like things that are unbelievable in our lives.
Melbourne, sold that out. I mean, it's just been great. So
New Zealand.
It's, but like Steve says, we tell the truth. Yeah, we tell the truth.
Before we wrap up, I do want to say this publicly, to know that I'm sure many, many, many families in Colombia are glad that you guys put your life on the line to make sure people are protected there. And there's an element of the way you deliver the messages. I can't believe how much respect and love you're given to a country like Colombia to have hope. It's very interesting to see America's known as this powerful nation that we like to take all the victories, we're this, we're that, and you're actually taking a complete different approach, saying, hey, they did it. We're just a couple cops, and you're taking this approach. And
it's
true. A lot of
Yeah,
respect from me to you.
true.
A lot of respect from me to you. Appreciate you guys coming up. But this is one last thing. What are you guys working on right now? So if I'm watching this and I want to follow some of your stuff, what is something you're working on right now that people can follow and find out more about?
Well, actually, we've got several things working, but if you go to deanarcos.com, that's our website. You can see there's a calendar on there to show you where we're speaking around the world. We're writing a book. We're working with a group called the Lost Clipper Project, where we're working on an 80-year-old cold case file involving the murders of 15 Americans. We've partnered up with the Partnership for Safe Medicines that is addressing counterfeit medications coming to the United States. We were on Capitol Hill 3 weeks ago talking to the House of Representatives Committee about that particular subject. We're working with a couple of producers on a potential new, and this is very potential, this is not a done deal, but a potential new TV series addressing the heroin, opioid, fentanyl epidemic in the United States right now. So there's a lot of irons in the fire. It's things that, again, we just never thought anything like this would happen to us.
So it's fun.
That's great. And you're on Twitter, DEA Narcos, and you're on Instagram, DEA Narcos. What I want you to do is I want you to send them a tweet after watching this. First of all, go follow them, and then send them a tweet, DEA Narcos, their handle, and let them know if you've watched the show and what do you love most about it and what you picked up from today's interview. And with that being said, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming out here in Dallas. Appreciate your time, truly. Really appreciate you guys coming out. Thank you.